This was the church that was built as the second building of the Waverly Hall Methodist Church. This was built here in the city limits after the railroad came through, and Mount Zion Methodist Church moved here, and it was renamed Waverly Hall Methodist. And at the time it was relocated here, it was called Waverly Hall Methodist Episcopal Church South. And it was part of the South Georgia Conference of Methodist Churches. And this building was used from 1896 until they built this new building right here in 1940. I think they started this in 47, 48, but it was finished in 49, I believe. And the congregation moved into that new building, and it's still used to this day. The original cornerstone that was here on this building was moved when this building was built, and it's on the corner over here.
So this is the cornerstone from that building over there?
Yes, it was moved over here when this building was built.
This is Waverly Hall ME Church South. Erected 1896, W.C. Jones pastor, W.I.H. Pitts chairman, and what is that?
L.W. Stanford and W.H. McCullough's building committee. And it's got Lockwood Brothers Architects and J.H. Is that Fulford F-U-L-F-O-R-D, Fulford contractor. And when the church was completed, they had a dedication ceremony, and the dedication service was held, and the dedication sermon was preached by Reverend Sam Jones. And at the time, Reverend Jones was the equivalent of Billy Graham. He was a very, very big name in the church back in those days. And you can see the Sunday school rooms that were added on in the back. And a couple of years ago, well, let me back up. The church was used until this building was built, and then it was sold to the Masons, and the Masonic Lodge moved into it. And it's been used for that purpose ever since. They of course boarded up the windows, but the original windows are still back there. They're kind of frosted glass, and the windows are made to, I believe they have hinges where they'll open up. But the building originally had a choir loft that stuck out on the back of it, kind of as like a big bay area. You've seen a bay window on the back of a house, or a room of a house. It had a big bay window sort of thing on the back, and that was the choir loft. And under the leadership of Reverend Ansley, they tore that choir loft off and built these Sunday school rooms. And a couple of years ago, there was some old stove flue chimneys on the back of it. And when they tore those stove flues off, you could see the wide boards from Mount Zion Church behind there. And they still had the original, what we call buttermilk paint. It was green and a kind of a light yellow color. And you could see, you know, it was the original trim work paint inside the church out there. And that same paint was used on the pews in that church, because there were a couple of them that survived and were still used. I don't know if you can still see it or not. No. They put a piece of plywood over it because it got in such bad condition, but when that chimney was taken down right there, behind it you could see the wide boards. That's been covered up. But if you stand back here, I don't know if you can see it. You have to come back in the wintertime. Let's go over to the street, see it from over there. You see that patchwork on the weatherboarding above the roof line? That's where the original choir loft was attached to the back of the church. It came out and then it was octagon shaped. Of course, once that was torn down, they put a stairway behind there where it was removed, and the choir was moved over into the side of the church instead of being behind the preacher, behind the pulpit area.
Gotcha.
It's a very beautiful old building inside. The sanctuary has never been painted. It's original woodwork, and very, very pretty.
Are these boarded up windows? Or
Yes,
bricked
yeah.
up, I mean?
Yeah, the downstairs of this building was the fellowship hall later. But when the church was first built, you can see how high off the ground it was.
Yeah.
And the schoolhouse was directly across the street. And Miss Margaret Pitts and Mr. Tom McElroy and different citizens around here that had attended school there as children told me that this is where everyone played on really hot days and on rainy days. You came over and played under the church.
Gotcha.
And they made a lot of memories up under here. It was wide open up until right here. And then they enclosed this from their back, and that became the fellowship hall sometime in the 1920s. I think maybe the same time they built the Sunday school rooms, they created a fellowship hall here. Had a kitchen and all up underneath there. And it had windows. Well, years later, I think the Masons, when they purchased the building, they boarded up or bricked up these windows.
You can see a little bit of the original weatherboarding sticking out there.
Notice how it's tapered
I see
on
that.
the edge. Very detailed.
Yeah, it is.
And again, there was an asbestos siding salesman came through Waverly Hall sometime in the late 40s and early 1950s, and they did a lot of houses here.
I was going to say, that
of
explains a
buildings.
few things.
House across the street, house next door, that house up there. There was lots of houses around here and that was good stuff too. You could paint it and the paint would stay on it. It would last a long time. But this room was added onto the front of this. The Masonic Lodge was dedicated in 1950, and this room was added on before that, right after they took possession of the building. This building originally had a front porch that went all the way across the front, and it had two front doors. It had one that went in over here, and it had one that went into the room that was actually the base for the steeple. The steeple was on this side of the church. And this building and the Baptist church were built along about the same time. The Baptist over here across the road, but the Baptist church was torn down and remodeled into the building that's there now in the early 1950s. But you can see the base of the steeple is still here.
Oh, yeah.
And the steeple, of course, was taken off years ago when a storm damaged it and it leaked really bad. But when the church was built next door, the bell was moved from this steeple over to the current church. And because electric chimes were put into that steeple over there when it was built, there was never a rope put on the bell. And when the bell was discovered up in the steeple, it had been forgotten that it was up there. And by the time it was discovered that it was there, rain had gotten in and the roof had leaked over the years, and the supports under the bell had all rotted, and it was very dangerous. So they went up and replaced all the supports, put a new rope on the bell, and Miss Mattie Jane Ellison donated the well pulley above her well. The little windlass that you'd use to draw a bucket of water, one was needed up in the attic, and she donated one, and it was put up there, and the rope was put on, and that bell was used up until a few years ago when, again, the roof started leaking and it was not properly cared for, and now the rope has been taken off because the bell's dangerous again.
Gotcha. Well, I gotta say, Dan, this is, you know, I kind of spent a lot of growing up in Waverly Hall, and this is the closest I've ever been to the old Masonic Lodge, as I always knew it, yeah. And it's a, I've driven by it for years, never walked up this close to it, and it is an impressive building.
Well, it's even more impressive on the inside, and maybe one day we can get permission from the Masonic Lodge to go inside.
What is that?
It's Warren McCutcheon's cement mixer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It still worked. He ran that thing when he built the addition on the back of my house.
Hey, I can see the top of the window there.
Yeah.
All right, well, I appreciate you giving us a little tour of the cemetery and the history of the church here.
My pleasure.
It's I'm very fascinated with it, and I love this building. There should be an old picture of it that we put in this video, but like I said earlier, I've driven by this place, you know, probably thousands of times, and this is the first time I've actually been this close to it that I remember. And it's an impressive building. So if you guys enjoyed this history tour, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.